We spent levels 1 and 2 understanding that we create our reality through beliefs and emotions. But I keep coming back to a deeper question. What is the reality we're creating from? Seth talks about framework 2, the inner senses, probable realities. I want to understand the architecture. What is the structure of consciousness itself?
That is exactly the question of the serious student, and I want to answer it by pulling a verbatim quote right out of Seth Speaks. He says, "You are not a physical being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a physical experience."
Right, which totally flips everything we usually think.
Oh, completely. Because, most people think of spirituality as, something you do on a yoga mat on Sundays to sort of escape the real world,
Back
right?
to retreat from reality.
Exactly. But Seth's entire cosmology argues that this solid room you're sitting in right now, the physical device you are literally listening to us on, that is the illusion. Yeah. The spiritual realm, that unseen architecture you're asking about, is actually the hard-nosed engine room of physics. So for you listening, we are moving way beyond the basics of manifesting today.
We're going deep.
We are. This deep dive is an advanced masterclass. We're mapping the wider Seth cosmology, and we're drawing strictly from the core texts, the nature of personal reality, Seth Speaks, the unknown reality, the nature of the psyche, and the Seth material.
Okay, so right now, as you're listening to this deep dive, you probably think your ears are just hearing audio waves vibrating against your eardrums.
Right, the standard biological explanation.
Exactly. But if we take Seth's architecture seriously, your inner self is actually translating non-physical data streams into localized audio sensations, like in real time.
Yes, you are continuously rendering the sound of our voices.
Rendering it. I love that word. Because to understand how that rendering process works, we have to look at the primary division in Seth's map, which is Framework 1 and Framework 2. We talk a lot about physical reality being a camouflage, but what does that actually mean structurally?
Well, if you look at the nature of personal reality, Seth defines Framework 1 not as a physical place, but as a highly specific psychological focus.
Okay, a focus, not a location.
Right. It's the linear, consecutive, cause and effect environment. It's the realm of the camouflage. And, the reason he uses the word camouflage is super crucial.
Because it implies it's hiding something.
Exactly. It implies that physical matter isn't the reality itself. It's just the pattern adopted by the underlying energy to, make itself perceptible to our highly specialized outer senses.
So Framework 1 is just the surface.
Yeah, it's entirely reactive. It doesn't originate anything at all. It is literally just the screen where the final materialized results are displayed. The actual generation of those events, like the calculations, the probabilities, the energy coalescing, all of that happens in Framework 2.
Okay, let's use a software analogy because for me, it really explains the mechanism of this. Framework 1 is like the graphical user interface of a computer program.
I like that.
Right, like you see a desktop, you see folders, a mouse cursor, that's the camouflage. But Framework 2 is the underlying source code.
The ones and zeros.
Yeah, the millions of lines of binary, the logic gates, the processing architecture. If you have a glitch on your screen, you don't take a physical rag and try to, scrub the pixels off the monitor.
No, you break the monitor.
Exactly, it has to go into the code. But what does that source code environment actually look like? Like, if it's not a misty realm with angels playing harps, what is the actual physics of Framework 2?
So Seth refers to it as the spacious present. Framework 2 operates on simultaneous time.
Right, simultaneous, like everything at once.
Everything. Past, present, and future are all occurring at the exact same time within a highly charged psychological medium.
That's really hard to wrap your head around.
It is, yeah. Because in this environment, thoughts and emotions are not abstract, fleeting things. They are the actual physics of that reality.
They have structure.
Yes. They possess mass, vitality, and electromagnetic reality. When you hold a belief or, say, an intense emotion, it instantly forms a geometric psychological pattern in Framework 2.
Oh, wow. So it literally builds something.
It literally builds something. These patterns act like magnets. They draw similar energies together. They mix, they merge, and they form the structural atoms of events.
Okay, so how does it get from there to here, to Framework 1?
Well, only when a psychological pattern achieves a certain threshold of intensity in Framework 2 does it literally break through the barrier and compile into the physical camouflage of Framework 1.
Compile. Yes, back to the software analogy. But here's my issue. If our inner senses are constantly orchestrating, like, millions of cellular functions and processing all this massive data in Framework 2, why is my conscious ego totally blind to it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Like if Framework 2 is the actual engine room, why do we experience this massive amnesia?
Yeah.
Did human consciousness just like devolve over time?
No, it wasn't a devolution at all. It was actually a highly intentional, very specialized focus.
Really? Intentional.
Absolutely. The physical senses, sight, hearing, touch, they're magnificent, but they are exclusionary filters. Their primary job is actually to block out the overwhelming data streams of Framework 2.
Okay, so they're keeping the noise out.
Right. Think about it. If you were consciously aware of the millions of probable realities intersecting your current moment or the telepathic background noise of every living thing around you, you couldn't focus enough to chop an onion or drive a car.
Yeah, you'd be totally paralyzed by data.
Exactly. The ego was developed as a specialized probe to experience the intensity of linear time. But because we became so fascinated by the physical camouflage, we sort of allowed the conscious awareness of our inner senses to atrophy.
So the blinders aren't a bug. They're actually a feature to let us play the physical game more intensely.
That's a perfect way to say it.
But, to access the source code, we have to circumvent those blinders. We have to use the inner senses. And in the Seth material, he describes several of them, but I kind of want to break down the actual mechanics, not just list them. Let's look at inner vibrational touch. How does that actually function?
Okay, let's apply it directly. Imagine you are standing in a forest, right? And you're looking at this ancient oak tree.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Your outer senses give you the camouflage data. You see the rough texture of the bark, the green of the leaves, the spatial distance between you and the trunk.
Right, the 3D rendering.
Yeah. But inner vibrational touch is the ability to expand the boundary of your own consciousness and literally merge it with the consciousness of the tree.
Like actually merge.
Yes. You don't just feel empathy for the tree, you directly cognize its vitality. You feel the upward thrust of sap through its core, the sluggish, deep sensation of its roots gripping the earth, its awareness of the shifting sunlight.
Hold on, if my consciousness is merging with the tree, how do I not lose my own mind? I mean, if I'm feeling what it feels to be wood and sap, at what point do I stop being me?
That right there is the paradox of multidimensional consciousness. Because in Framework 2, boundaries are not rigid walls. They are permeable membranes.
Permeable, so things flow back and forth.
Exactly. When you use inner vibrational touch, your core identity remains entirely intact, but its scope expands. You perceive the tree's essence from within your own center.
That's incredible.
It is an act of profound intimacy without the annihilation of the self. And, this mechanism applies to another vital inner sense, which is the perception of past, present, and future.
Because time is simultaneous in Framework 2.
Right. Since time is simultaneous in the spacious present, this sense allows you to feel the entirety of an organism's existence. You look at that same oak tree, and you simultaneously perceive the acorn it was centuries ago, and the decaying log it will become in the future.
All at once.
All existing as a single breathing gestalt in the present moment.
Okay, I have to stop here and address the massive cultural baggage attached to this stuff. Because when people hear words like telepathy or clairvoyance or perceiving the future, the immediate association is like parlor tricks or comic book mutants or the supernatural.
Oh, absolutely. And Seth is aggressive in dismantling that exact bias. He emphasizes there is nothing supernatural about the inner senses.
They're just natural.
Completely natural. They are the baseline biological and psychological heritage of the species. I mean, every cell in your physical body uses telepathy to coordinate with every other cell to keep you alive.
Wow, really? Cellular telepathy.
Yes. They communicate outside of linear time to anticipate physical needs. The only reason these abilities seem magical to us is that the ego has constructed this artificial wall of disbelief. We've hypnotized ourselves into believing that only the physical data is real.
Which brings us to the structure of the actual identity doing the perceiving. Because if there is this vast framework too, and these incredibly powerful inner senses operating under the hood, the me that is talking right now feels dangerously small.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. If we map Seth's pyramid of consciousness, the ego is just the absolute tip of the iceberg.
It's the outermost surface. The ego is the portion of the self that identifies strictly with the physical camouflage. It deals with the electric bill, the daily schedule, the mirror reflection.
The day-to-day survival stuff.
Right. But immediately behind it is the inner self, or the inner ego. And this portion resides fully in Framework 2.
Okay, so what does the inner self actually do?
It is the master architect of your immediate physical life. It translates your conscious beliefs into the physical events you encounter. It regulates your digestion, your heartbeat, your cellular regeneration.
All the stuff I don't have to think about.
Exactly. All the miraculous processes the outer ego takes completely for granted. The inner self is the interface between the infinite potential of the source code and the specific graphics rendered on your screen.
But the architecture goes infinitely deeper than just the inner self. And this is where, in Seth Speaks, he introduces the concept of the entity, or the Oversoul.
Yes, and this is where it gets vast.
Because the entity contains not just the inner self of this current lifetime, but the inner selves of dozens, perhaps hundreds of other lifetimes, past, present, future, probable selves, all existing simultaneously within this massive gestalt.
Imagine the entity as a brilliant, multifaceted diamond. Your current life, with your specific name and personality, is just one single facet of that diamond catching the light of physical reality.
Just one facet.
Right. The entity is experiencing the 14th century, the 21st century, and a probable reality where humanity never industrialized, all at the exact same time.
Okay, hold on. This is where I really have to push back, because this induces a genuine existential crisis for the advanced student.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Like, if my Oversoul is experiencing 50 different lifetimes simultaneously, and I am just one tiny facet, doesn't that make my current ego completely insignificant?
It feels that way, yeah.
It sounds like I'm just a disposable probe sent out to gather data for a larger, indifferent being. I mean, how is that not utterly depressing?
It's only depressing if you apply the limitations of Framework 1 physics to Framework 2 consciousness.
Okay, explain it.
You're thinking of the entity as a corporation and yourself as a low-level employee, but consciousness operates like a hologram. If you shatter a holographic plate, every single tiny shard contains the entire, complete image of the original.
Oh, the whole is in every part.
Yes. You are not a disposable appendage of the entity. You are the entity, focused intently in this specific space-time coordinate. As Seth explains it, as your own dreams arise from you, attain a seeming independence, and return to you without ever leaving you, so do the entity's personalities arise.
So I have the whole blueprint inside me.
Exactly. Your current ego possesses the entire psychic blueprint of the Oversoul. The boundary between you and it is an illusion of focus, not a reality of structure.
Okay, the hologram mechanism makes sense. The part contains the whole. That makes me feel a little better. But then Seth shatters the ceiling entirely by introducing Seth 2.
Oh, yes. Just when we begin to grasp the vastness of the entity, the material shifts into an entirely different stratum.
It gets even bigger.
Much bigger. Seth 2 is described as a pyramid gestalt of being, or a broader energy personality essence. Seth himself, the personality communicating through Jane Roberts, is merely a component or specialized projection of this much larger consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah, Seth 2 exists at the very outer fringes of our galaxy's consciousness architecture.
What does a pyramid gestalt of being even mean functionally? Like, how does a human mind interact with something that alien?
We can really only understand it through its perceptual scope. When Seth 2 briefly communicates in the sessions, the terminology and the cadence radically shift.
The tone changes completely, right?
Completely. It is a consciousness whose present moment might encompass the entire birth, evolution, and death of our physical planet. It represents the endless, nested nature of consciousness seeking to know itself.
Nested, like Russian dolls.
Exactly. Just as your cells combine to form your organs, and your organs combine to form your physical body, your entity combines with other entities to form these massive, galaxy-spanning gestalts. They are the macro architects of reality.
Managing probabilities on a cosmic scale.
Yes, while we manage them on a personal scale.
Okay, so if the self stretches from an earthly ego balancing a checkbook all the way up to a planetary scale gestalt, and if the solid world around us is just a camouflage projection, what does that make our shared physical reality?
How do you mean?
Well, how do billions of individual inner cells manage to look at the exact same physical chair in a coffee shop and agree on its shape?
They do it through continuous, instantaneous telepathic agreement. Seth explicitly states in The Nature of the Psyche that physical reality is a mass hallucination.
A mass hallucination. That's a heavy phrase.
It is, but again, we must look at the mechanics of that term. It is a highly cohesive, deeply coordinated dream. When you walk into that coffee shop, your inner self is constantly receiving and broadcasting telepathic data to every other consciousness in that room.
So we're constantly talking to each other underneath it all.
Endlessly. You all subconsciously agree on the coordinates, the density, and the electromagnetic properties of the table, the chairs, the walls. You are co-creating the environment in real time, matching your individual projections so perfectly that the camouflage appears seamlessly solid to everyone.
So, to ask the ultimate practical question of this cosmology, when I use the level 1 and 2 techniques to shift a core belief about scarcity or illness, am I changing the dream or am I waking up a little?
You are doing both, and really, one requires the other. By shifting your beliefs consciously, you alter the electromagnetic code you are broadcasting into Framework 2, which absolutely changes the physical events that render in your life. You change the plot of the dream.
Right.
But more importantly, the very act of realizing you have the power to change it triggers a deeper lucidity. You realize your identity is not the helpless avatar reacting to the graphics. You are the programmer writing the code. You wake up to your position as the dreamer.
That's incredibly empowering. But, grasping this intellectually as a fascinating philosophy is completely different from surviving the actual physical process of waking up.
Oh, without a doubt. It's a grueling process.
Right. If we want to understand how a human being actually reads this map and walks this territory, we have to look at the intense, grueling reality of Jane Roberts herself.
Jane's biography is the ultimate case study, and it forces us to abandon the New Age romanticism of psychic phenomena. There is this pervasive myth that channeling or multidimensional awareness is this blissful, effortless state.
Yeah, the trope where you just sit on a cushion, a beam of light hits your crown chakra, and suddenly you're downloading cosmic secrets.
Exactly, the instant enlightenment trope. But the Seth material documents something entirely different. It was a terrifying, gradual, and incredibly disciplined dismantling of her Framework 1 defenses. And it started with something that seems utterly contradictory to advanced spiritual work: a Ouija board.
Yeah, that always surprised me. It seems like a parlor game.
It does, but we have to analyze the neurological and psychological mechanics of why it worked for her. Jane was a highly intellectual, skeptical, analytically rigid writer. Her ego's defenses against Framework 2 data were practically impenetrable.
So if she tried to just meditate,
If she had just tried to sit quietly and meditate, her analytical mind would have instantly shut down any intuitive impulse, just labeling it as imagination.
it's the equivalent of a firewall blocking unverified data packets.
Exactly the right metaphor. The Ouija board acted as a mechanical backdoor through the firewall. By requiring her and her husband Rob to place their hands on the planchette and focus intently on the physical spelling out of letters, it completely occupied the conscious ego's need for motor action and linear control.
Oh, it distracted the ego.
Yes, the ego was distracted by the physical game, which allowed a tiny, unrecognized stream of Framework 2 data, the initial Seth communications, to bypass the analytical mind and trigger subconscious muscular movements. It was training wheels for the inner senses.
And once the inner senses began to open, the training wheels came off. She eventually learned to allow the Seth personality to utilize her physical vocal cords. But Seth talks about this mechanism in terms of neurological pulses. What is the physics of a consciousness hijacking a physical brain?
Well, Seth explains that physical reality is not a continuous stream. It actually flashes on and off.
Like a strobe light.
Exactly like a strobe light. We only perceive the on pulses, the moments when consciousness focuses deeply into the camouflage. During the off pulses, which happen infinitely faster than our outer senses can measure, our consciousness actually withdraws into Framework 2.
We dip back into the source.
Right. What Jane learned to do through immense practice was to widen the gap of those off pulses. She learned to slip her own ego out of the primary neurological focal point during those microseconds.
Hopping out of the way.
Yes, allowing the massive energy of the Seth personality to translate its non-physical concepts into the neurological vocabulary stored in Jane's brain.
She's essentially stepping away from the microphone of her own nervous system. But stepping away from that microphone, opening the inner senses to that degree, took a devastating physical toll. We cannot discuss this masterclass without looking directly at Jane's severe rheumatoid arthritis.
We can't. It is the most challenging and instructive part of her journey. If we hold strictly to Seth's core premise, that the physical body is a flawless reflection of the inner psychological state, then we cannot write off her arthritis as just bad biological luck.
Right, it had to mean something deeper.
It was a profound, entrenched, somatic metaphor. It was the physical manifestation of ultimate psychological resistance.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that resistance.
Yeah.
Because she is channeling the most liberating architecture of consciousness in human history. She's dictating books that explicitly tell humanity we are limitless, multidimensional beings, and meanwhile her own joints are fusing together and her body is literally turning into stone. Why?
Because the ego is terrified of dissolution. As Jane's inner senses opened wider, she was directly experiencing the simultaneous time, the endless probabilities, and the massive entity structures we just discussed.
And that was too much.
Way too much. To her highly localized Framework 1 identity, Jane Roberts, writer, living in an apartment in Elmira, this vastness felt like annihilation. The ego looked at Framework 2 and said, if I am all of these things, then I am nothing.
Wow, the firewall couldn't handle the bandwidth, so it tried to shut down the hardware?
It's beautifully put, yes. The body became physical armor. The arthritis literally crystallized the ego's terror of the unknown. Seth was explicitly clear with her in the private sessions. Her immobility was an unconscious protective mechanism. She was terrified of moving too fast, too far into multidimensional reality.
Her body was hitting the brakes.
The stiffness was her psychological brakes screeching, trying to violently anchor her to the familiar, bounded reality of Framework 1. When she felt secure and trusted the inner self, the symptoms would temporarily ease. But the moment the fear of ego death flared up, the physical calcification returned.
This is why I think Jane's struggle is the ultimate mirror for the advanced student. It's very easy to listen to this material and intellectually agree that, yeah, we are multidimensional oversouls.
Sure, it sounds great in theory.
Right. But when you actually start breaking down the boundaries of your own reality, it is terrifying. We all have that armor. We all manifest physical symptoms, career blockages, or neuroses that serve as unconscious anchors to keep us feeling safe and bounded.
We do. We cling to Framework 1.
Dropping those defenses requires a level of courage most people simply aren't prepared for.
It really requires completely reorienting your relationship with your own mind. Because the ego fights so fiercely to maintain the illusion of the camouflage, we cannot brute force our way into Framework 2. If you try to smash the ego, it will just build thicker armor, just as Jane's body did.
So what's the alternative?
We have to use subtle, advanced techniques to slip past the guard. We have to gently reverse engineer our own awareness.
Which brings us to the pivot. How do you and I, operating in our daily lives, actually begin to access this source code without triggering a massive ego backlash?
We do it by tracing the data packets back to their origin. I want to introduce a highly specific inquiry technique drawn from the mechanics of the nature of the psyche. The practice is called tracing the thought to its source.
Break down the mechanics of this for me. Let's say I'm sitting at my desk and I suddenly have a spike of anxiety about a work deadline. Normally, the ego grabs that thought and starts spinning out 10 different worst-case scenarios.
And the moment the ego grabs the content of the thought, the deadline, the boss, the fear of getting fired, you are entirely trapped in Framework 1.
I'm staring at the monitor, stressing about the pixels.
Exactly. The advanced technique requires that the moment that strong thought arises, you completely ignore its content. You treat the thought strictly as an incoming data packet, and you ask a mechanical question: where did this thought come from?
Finding the IP address of the impulse.
Exactly that. You trace the thought backward. Did the anxiety about the deadline arise from a surface belief that you aren't competent? Trace that belief deeper. Where did the belief in incompetence come from? Did it come from a sudden, unexplained emotional drop in your chest?
Keep going backward.
Trace the physical emotion deeper still. As you follow the thread backward, pulling away from the words and the images, you move into a deeper, physiological, wordless knowing. You are utilizing your inner senses to walk upstream.
You're pushing past the loud, chaotic tributaries of the ego, moving deep into the silent architecture, looking for the underground spring. But what happens when you hit the source? Because thoughts have to originate somewhere.
When you trace it far enough, you hit a boundary. You hit a space where the thought hasn't quite compiled into language or imagery yet. You begin to experientially feel the gap, the profound silence between thoughts.
The gap.
Yes. And here is the ultimate secret of the Seth cosmology, that silence is not empty space. That gap is the highly charged, infinite creative matrix of Framework 2. It is the raw energy before it takes on the camouflage pattern.
You're literally standing in the engine room.
And experiencing that engine room fundamentally shifts you from a theoretical student into an active practitioner. As Seth dictates in The Unknown Reality, and this must be understood literally, Framework 2 is not a place. It is a state of being, a condition of consciousness.
Not a place. a condition.
You do not travel there. You shift your focal frequency to align with it. And that silent gap between your thoughts is the frequency tuning dial.
But understanding this technique conceptually does nothing for you listening unless you put it into the hardware of your own life.
Which is why we have a rigorous exercise to close this masterclass.
Let's give them the 24-hour challenge.
Today, you're going to carve out exactly 10 minutes of uninterrupted time. Sit down with a journal, but you are not going to write a diary entry. You're going to focus your entire consciousness on a single, highly specific operational question. Where do my thoughts come from before I think them?
And the crucial rule here is that you cannot allow your analytical ego to answer. If you start writing down psychological theories about the subconscious mind or brain chemistry, you are failing the exercise. You're back in framework 1.
You are absolutely right. Your physical brain deals with deductive reasoning. It cannot comprehend the spacious present. Write the question at the top of the page. And then wait. Become the observer.
Just watch.
Wait for the next thought to arrive and try to catch it the millisecond before it forms into a recognizable word. Feel for the inner vibrational touch of the energy compiling. Notice the profound, heavy silence that exists just behind the noise of your mind.
It's like you're watching the surface of a perfectly still pond, waiting to perceive the exact mechanism of the bubble forming at the bottom before it rises and breaks the surface. And as you sit with that challenge today, as you hunt for that gap between your thoughts, consider the ultimate implication of the architecture we've mapped out today.
When you finally locate that silence, when you slip past the camouflage and touch the source code, what if that silence isn't an empty void? What if that silence is actually the vast multidimensional consciousness of your entity, your oversoul, holding the entire holographic blueprint of your existence, quietly listening back at you?
Think about the power of the spiritual being residing in that physical landscape. We'll see you on the next deep dive.